Right, what's going on guys, Vanity here. I'm back with another tutorial, hope you're all doing well today. This one's going to be part 1 of the 10 best mixing tips to improve your mixes for both beginners and advanced users. Now this one's part 1 like I just said, so there's going to be 5 in this episode and then there's going to be 5 in the next episode which will be out on Sunday. So this video is going to have little to none, probably none, demonstration of me doing anything on screen. So it's literally going to be just an audio track of me talking and there's not really going to be anything to actually watch. So if you want to go and put on another video and just listen to this, that's fine. I recommend you take some notes as well, because I'm going to be saying kind of just, you know, throwing a lot of information out there at you, and I'm kind of hoping that some people might, you know, make some notes. They might hear something they like and go and research it. That'd be dope. Well, that's what I do anyway when I'm watching, you know, tutorials online anyway. So I've searched around the whole internet. I've also asked a lot of my music production friends and a lot of people kind of associated with music, just for for everyone's input on the 10 best mixing tips to improve a mix for both beginners and advanced users. So yeah, these are going to be a lot more broader than kind of like compression settings or equalization settings. They're going to be things that you can actually apply to your own mixes on a kind of grand scale. And with that, I hope that they are going to help you improve your mixes. So in this video, these are going to be the 5 best mixing tips in my own personal opinion. If you don't agree with the 5 that I've picked, that's completely fine. Please let me know your suggestions in the comment section below, and I can compile and include them perhaps in part 2 and maybe even in part 3 if I make a part 3 of this series. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into this week's video. So number 1 is the biggest one for me, and these are in no particular order, but this is number 1 because I think it is a massive technique that probably made the biggest difference for me anyway, and that is reference tracks. I'd heard so many people discussing reference tracks, but I never really saw the importance of them for a really long time. So, you know, what is a reference track? In really basic and simple terms, a reference track is a track that you are referencing your own mix against, hence the name. So you pick a track that you really like the mix on, and you have it in your DAW project in some kind of high quality format, WAV, AIF or FLAC, something that's high quality. If you can only get an MP3, that will do, but just remember that you are going to be missing a bit of information. And you make your mixing decisions, or some of your mixing decisions, the kind of global overall mixing decisions you make based around that track. So for example, you could have a massive attack track in there, for example, and the bass line sounds dope, it sounds fantastic, it sounds thick, warm, and you kind of want to get your bass sounding like that. So you might pull up your analyzer and you can see that their bass is sitting around 50 Hz. Yours might be hitting a lot higher, so that you could then drop yours down a little lower to match this. Now the important thing to remember is that you never reference against their loudness. So the tracks you're referencing against are most likely going to have been mastered by professional mastering engineers with a hell of a lot of experience, and it's going to probably have been run through state-of-the-art analog outboard equipment, especially if it's, you know, a commercial release track. It's also important to remember that the reference track doesn't have to be in the genre that you're working in. A great mix isn't genre specific. So for example, I consider myself, I don't like to put myself in a box, but I consider myself a kind of hip-hop, R&B music producer. Some of my reference tracks, they're not all hip-hop. There's one that's hip-hop, there's one that's pop, there's one that's experimental electronica. You know, I've got kind of a mixed bag. It can be anything. It's about the mix, it's not about your taste. You just have to keep in mind, if you do this, the characteristics of the genre that you're working in, if you wish to stick to them, that is. So the reference tracks that you use, you need to study them. You need to know how they sound down to every nuance in the record. You need to know them inside out. Now this comes into play when, for example, a mix engineer or a music producer is working in a new studio or a new room. They will often play their reference track selection in order to determine how that room is sounding. So if they know how their track sounds in a fairly neutral room, in a neutral kind of environment, and they play in this new studio and the bass is a few dB louder and they can notice that, they know that the room is adding, I don't know, 2 or 3 dBs of bass, so they can then compensate for this when they're mixing their record. Now I don't want to give too many away, because reference tracks are kind of like, they're very kind of specific for the producer and they're also kind of personal, but 2 of mine just to get you started are Dr. Dre's Lightspeed from his 2001 album and Massive Attack's Angel from their Mezzane album. But please feel free to use whatever you like, but remember, it's about the mix, not about your taste. So it's about how good the mix is sounding. It doesn't matter if you like the record or not, it's just about the great mix. So on to the second one. Now the second one might be seen as a kind of cop-out, and it certainly won't apply to everyone, but it is very important, and that is understanding what plugins do. Now actually learning what the plugins do and how to use them properly will cover the most ground from taking your mixes from amateur to professional. Now the obvious effects are equalizers and compressors. You need to learn these inside and out, and more importantly you need to learn when to use these and how to use them. For example, you need to learn how to create space and depth in a mix using high-pass filters and reverbs. You need to learn all the tricks in the book using EQ, compression and reverb, as these are the three main effects. You know, you must learn everything that you can do with these three effects to get the best out of your mixes. So I remember when I first started out producing music all those many years ago, I used to place a compressor and an EQ on almost every channel and not really understand why or what they were doing. You know, I'd just place them on there out of habit, or I'll just place them on there because I thought that was what you were supposed to do. But actually now understanding what they do and how to use them, I don't always use an EQ or compressor on even my drums, because as I kind of mentioned briefly in some of my previous tutorials, sample packs, especially commercially released sample packs, the drum sounds in there have already been compressed. They've already been EQ'd. So as I try to find them as close to perfection in my mind as I can, I don't tend to really have to do anything to them. When you get to the point where you're making kind of dope mixes, might sound a bit big-headed actually, but I kind of consider myself as making good mixes now, you actually use less and less plugins. I remember when I was starting out again, I used to use hundreds of plugins on a track. You know, I'd throw absolutely every single plugin you could think of on a record to try and get it sounding dope. Now I use 3: EQ, compression and reverb, and I might only use less than 5 EQs and compressors throughout a track. Make sure you learn what they do before you start to use them. Stemming off from that slightly, but still number 2, understanding the 3D space you have in your mix is critical. Don't place everything in the center. Generally speaking, you should only place the kick drum, bass line, and sometimes the snare drum dead center. Everything else is going to sound better panned out or pushed to the back of the mix using reverb and EQ. A lot of people don't understand this, but there's a massive kind of 3D element to mixing. Think about the 5.1 surround sound systems. Even if you're not mixing music for them, you've still got a massive space to work in, so it's really important that you learn how to, you know, fill this whole space and create something that's known as the wall of sound. A couple of great reads I'd recommend for getting you started in the world of mixing is The Art of Mixing by David Gibson, and there's also a video which you could probably find on YouTube or perhaps download online which accompanies the book, which is great. It's very kind of, you'll notice that when you watch it, it looks very strange. It's very old, but the principles are still relevant. It gives you a really great kind of solid foundation to what mixing is, and also how to use the 3D space that you have available to you. The second one is Mixing Secrets for the Small Studio by Mike Senor, who is one of the editors for the Sound on Sound magazine, I believe. Alright, so the third mixing tip is checking your music on other mediums. This is super important, you know, super critical you do this before sending any demo of any kind to any record label or artists, for example. So you might have your track sounding absolutely fantastic on your home system, on your headphones, on your monitors, but on a pair of iPod earbuds, it may sound absolutely terrible, or the snare could be too loud, or the bass is missing, or, you know, and any number of things could have happened. This is also the case for any mediums. Try and play your music on as many different mediums as you can before releasing it. In your car is a great one. So you may be at this stage asking yourself, well, why would I care what it sounds like on Apple earbuds? You know, I'm going to be using these dope headphones to listen to my beats on. Why does it matter what they sound like on iPod earphones? I'm never going to use them. That's a fair question, but it's important because that's what a great deal of your listeners will be using to play back your music. So think about when you're walking around, when you're outside somewhere at a shopping centre, or when you're on your university campus, or when you're at school, wherever you might be, you'll notice a lot of people are going to be using the famous, you know, Apple earphones to listen to their music. Now, the new generation of Apple earphones aren't actually too bad, but they're never going to sound as good as headphones because the speaker in them is absolutely tiny. That's why I've actually recommended to a lot of people that it's not a bad idea to purchase a pair of the popular Beats headphones, as so many people are currently using these, in order to hear your music how other people are hearing it. Because think about this, you're listening to your music on your £500 monitors or your £100 or £200 headphones, possibly more, but that isn't how everyone else is hearing it. They might be hearing your record completely differently to how you're hearing it, simply because of the playback system. The ultimate goal after mastering is to get your track sounding great across all systems, not to get it fantastic on one or two. Now, a great deal of this is done in the mix, but it's also got a lot to do with mastering, so when you give your track to a mastering engineer, engineer, which I'd always recommend to do. Never master your own records unless you just put them on SoundCloud. Or the fourth technique is don't monitor too loud. Don't monitor too loud during the mixing process. This is a common pitfall among new musicians and music producers. As we all know, music sounds better louder. You shouldn't ever need to monitor at more than 90 dBA because at this level your ears are at their optimal listening capability. If you push your mix any louder, your ears will begin to tire quickly and could cause permanent hearing damage. It will also give the illusion that the mix is sounding good because of the loudness. It's much better to listen to your mixes at very low levels all the time. This will allow you to identify general mix level problems and forces your brain to heighten your attentiveness. Now what I do and what you should do is if you aim to get your mix sounding good at really low levels, it most likely sounds great at those high levels too. Now what I mean by sounding good is when you're listening to your music at low levels, you need to hear each of the main elements: the kick, the snare, the vocals if it has vocals, and the bass. If any one of those is missing at low levels, you need to adjust your mix to suit. I also want to add that you should always check the mono capability of your mix before releasing any record. This is important, although there are of course fewer and fewer instances of mono playback still around in the world today. However, if you're making music for the club, or if your music will more than likely be played in the club at some point, which with most electronic music is commonly the case, always check that the most important aspects of your mix in mono are there. So the vocals, the drums, the bass. So most clubs, if you've ever noticed, which you probably haven't, but they only have mono playback systems, so there's no stereo. Now, this is because it's cheaper and also because it's very unlikely that you're going to find someone stood in a club commenting on how wide the stereo image of the record is. Also, always keep the master bus clean while mixing. Although it can be very tempting to place a limiter or a bunch of mastering plugins on the output, don't. You'll always get a better finished result if you stick to this one rule. Now that was kind of a few techniques in one there, but they're all super important. So the fifth and final one is separating the mix in creative sessions. Now this is one of my own tips that I've come up with, and I have not seen it online anywhere yet, so I'm not sure if it's been, discussed, but it's something that I've developed over the past kind of 5 or 6 years of making music, and I've kind of, tweaked it to suit. This has always allowed me to have my mindset in the right place when approaching either the creative portion or the mixing portion of the record. So when you start writing any track, the first day of that writing process, the creation process, is what I call the crave session. So you're getting all your ideas down, you're experimenting with sounds, maybe you're adding in some drum samples, you're just generally experimenting and getting all your ideas down, just laying the foundation or the skeleton of the record. For this session, any plugins that I use will be stock Ableton. Now I'm not saying they're bad because they're actually very good, but they're just quick and easy to load up in a rush. I won't spend much, if any, time on the mix of this record in this session. It'll purely be creative and just to get my ideas down. Then the next day will be the mix session. This will be the day that I sit down, I arrange, I colour all my tracks, I group what needs to be grouped, and I just mix the record. Now a great mix is nothing if the track is lacking originality or creativity. The idea is what's essential. Once the idea has been creative and developed, only then should you apply the technical aspects of mixing, all the boundaries that a lot of producers will work within to fit their chosen genre. Now I think it's fair to say that the mixing elements of music production can be extremely stressful, especially if your record isn't sounding how you had envisioned. This is why many producers choose to have mix engineers mix their records for them. I say the term producer loosely, as this is almost as unforgiving as ghost production in my opinion. How you mix your record is everything, man. I mean, it's your stamp, it's your sound. Do you think if Flying Lotus had passed his ideas over to a mix engineer, his records would sound the same? Something else I've been seeing on the internet the last few weeks, and I wanted to mention actually at this point, is that a beat maker is not a music producer. A beat maker in its simplest form means to write beats, usually hip-hop instrumentals. It's usually associated with the hip-hop community. This might include some light and basic mixing over the record. A music producer in 2015 can and does very often write, compose, produce and mix the record. The producer would work with the artist, developing a track, refining the lyrics or the melody, taking a track from A to B, not just to simply create the music and then pass it off to the artist. I definitely deem mastering as a dark art. Mastering engineers are definitely wizards of some kind. They give your track that extra edge or that extra loudness that is really impossible to get any other way. It's also really important to have a second set of ears listen over your record. Often us music producers get too emotionally attached to the tracks we've produced because we've literally spent hours and hours with the damn thing on loop, and it's stuck in our minds so much that we can actually fail to spot simple mixing flaws throughout the record. I also wanted to say at the end of this tutorial that there is so much rubbish on the internet about audio processing, audio mixing, producing. Maybe 80% of the stuff I read is complete garbage, which was actually one of the reasons I started this YouTube channel. Because I'm currently in my last year studying for my Bachelor of Science degree in music technology, so you can bet the information I'm giving you is solid. And go off and research it. Don't believe anything that anyone says, even me. Go off and research and come to your own opinion, because there's plenty of articles on almost any element of mixing online. There's literally thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of articles. Sound on Sound have some great ones. The 2 books I mentioned I'll put links to in the description. But just don't believe all these videos you're watching. Make sure you go off and you do your own research and you find out things by yourself, because I think sometimes that can aid your learning process a lot more than just having someone like me talking to you for, I don't know what, 15 minutes. So these 5 things that I've said, go off and do a little bit more research off them, make some notes and apply them to your mixes, and I really hope it helps, and if it does, please let me know in the comments below. So this was the first 5. The next 5 are going to be out I'll say this Sunday. It'll be next Sunday when you're watching this. So in the meantime, as I said at the start, please suggest any mixing techniques you'd like to see included, or maybe some that you would really like to know a little more about, or maybe some that you're having trouble using your own mixes. Just suggest absolutely any. I'm pretty open to anything. I've already had some people suggesting ideas for the channel, which is absolutely fantastic. Thank you if you're one of those people. I do take all your ideas to heart, and I am actually making a couple of videos based around some of the suggestions that people have already given me. Again, just want to stress, I really hope these tips are serving you well. These are 5 that have served me amazingly well for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years I've been producing music, so I hope you get a lot of use out of them. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you again next Sunday. Hope you have a fantastic week. Peace.